So let's set the scene. Cincinnati, the Natty, home of chili on spaghetti, which frankly is a culinary crime we should investigate another day. But on May 1st, 2025, something far less debatable and far more tragic kicked off. Young Ryan Hinton, just 18 years old, found himself in the kind of situation no teenager should, on the wrong end of a police chase involving a reportedly stolen Kia. Yes, a Kia. Not exactly a getaway vehicle you'd see in a Bond film, is it? More like something you'd use for a particularly disappointing grocery run. The chase, as these things often do, ended badly. Very badly. Police officers, presumably after a pursuit that involved all the grace of a startled rhino, confronted Ryan. According to the official narrative, a narrative that always seems to be written by someone who got a B in creative writing, Ryan pointed a handgun. A handgun with an extended magazine, no less, because apparently, if you're going to allegedly point a gun, you go for the deluxe edition. Officers shouted, "He's got a gun!" Which, to be fair, is generally what you shout in that situation. Then shots were fired. Two of them, Ryan Hinton was killed. Just like that. Another young life. Poof. Gone. Now, the Cincinnati Police Department, in its infinite wisdom and transparency, later released body camera footage. We'll get to the quality of that footage shortly. But spoiler alert, if you were hoping for a crystal clear Scorsese-directed epic, you'd be sorely mistaken. The immediate aftermath, however, was clear enough. A family was shattered, a young man was dead. And the circumstances? Well, let's just say they were as murky as the Ohio River after a particularly enthusiastic industrial spill. The police had their story, and a grieving family was left with a gaping hole and a mountain of questions. The incident involved 4 suspects fleeing the stolen vehicle. Because, of course, it's never just one person in a stolen Kia. It's practically a clown car of questionable life choices. 2 were caught and arrested. 1 remained on the run, presumably searching for a slightly more reliable make of car for their next alleged escapade. But for Ryan Hinton, there were no more escapades. His story, tragically, had reached its final abrupt chapter, penned by the Cincinnati police, leaving his father, Rodney, to pick up the pieces of a narrative he never asked to be a part of. This, folks, is where our story truly and tragically accelerates. The day after Ryan's death, May 2nd, Rodney Hinton Jr. and his family were given the distinct privilege of viewing the police body camera footage. Imagine that. You've just lost your son, your 18-year-old boy, and now you get to watch his final moments, filmed by the very people involved in his death. It's like being forced to watch a snuff film starring your own child, with the director offering helpful, if somewhat biased, commentary. Unsurprisingly, reports indicate Rodney was visibly distraught and despondent afterward. You think? What did they expect? A round of applause? A polite critique of the camera angles? Hours. Literally hours after seeing this footage, something inside Rodney Hinton Jr. apparently snapped. Snapped like a dry twig. Snapped like a reality TV star denied their close-up. Grief, as we know, is a powerful, unpredictable beast. It can make you want to curl up in a ball or scream at the sky, or in Rodney's case, allegedly get into your car with a purpose so singular, so devastating, it defies rational explanation. He was a man with no prior felonies, mind you, not a hardened criminal, just a father pushed beyond the brink into a landscape of pure, unadulterated despair. Now, what does a distraught, despondent father, fresh from viewing footage of his son's killing by police, do? According to prosecutors, he gets into his car and decides to engage in a spot of, well, let's call it extreme traffic enforcement critique. The target? An unsuspecting Hamilton County Sheriff's deputy. This wasn't a meticulously planned Bond villain scheme. This was the act of a man whose emotional GPS had not just malfunctioned, but had spontaneously combusted, leaving him navigating by raw, unprocessed agony. It's a horrifying thought, a truly awful decision. The Hamilton County prosecutor would later claim, with all the gravitas they could muster, that evidence and witnesses would show Rodney Hinton Jr. as deliberate attempt to kill the deputy. Deliberate, perhaps, but fueled by what? A sudden passion for automotive mayhem? Or was it something a little more complex, a little more tied to the events of the preceding 24 hours? It's almost as if one tragic event, poorly handled and opaquely explained, might just, lead to another. Shocking, I know. It's almost like actions have consequences, even for those wearing badges. So, where does this alleged act of vehicular vengeance take place? Near the University of Cincinnati. Why? Because the universe, in its infinite capacity for cruel irony, decided the deputy in question would be directing traffic for a graduation ceremony. Yes, a graduation. A celebration of young people embarking on their futures that Ryan Hinton would now never have. The symbolism is so on the nose, it's practically punching you in the face. It's like a cosmic joke delivered by a particularly malevolent stand-up comedian. The deputy wasn't even on regular duty. He was a special deputy, recently retired, but still picking up off-duty assignments. Think of it as the gig economy, but for law enforcement. He was outside his car, presumably ensuring a smooth flow of proud parents and slightly hungover graduates, when Rodney, Hinton Jr.'s vehicle allegedly turned him into an unwilling participant in a tragedy. The deputy was struck, fatally. He died at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, the very institution whose graduates he was helping to shepherd. The layers of awful here are thicker than a 7-layer dip left out in the sun. Rodney Hinton Jr., after the incident, was also taken to a hospital. One can only imagine the scene. Chaos, flashing lights, the smell of despair and burnt rubber, and in the middle of it all, a father whose grief had apparently metastasized into a destructive force. This wasn't a carefully orchestrated attack against a specific individual perceived as responsible for his son's death. This was, it seems, a blind swipe at the uniform, at the system that he felt had stolen his son, occurring at a place celebrating the very thing his son had been denied: a future. The University of Cincinnati president, Neville Pinto, later called for a moment of silence during a commencement ceremony, a moment of silence, because that apparently is the go-to response when the fabric of society frays so spectacularly right on your doorstep. One wonders if they also offered grief counseling to the graduates who got a front row seat to a real-life horror show. Congratulations on your degree! And as a special bonus, here's some unprocessed trauma to kickstart your adult life. Don't spend it all in one therapy session. Fast forward to May 3rd, 2025, Rodney Hinton Jr.'s first court appearance. Now, court appearances are generally solemn affairs. Lots of wood paneling, people in robes, the hushed tones of justice, or something approximating it. But Rodney's was a little different. It had an ambiance, a certain, and by, I mean it was absolutely teeming with cops. Not just a few, not a polite handful, a large number of deputies, as the reports delicately put it. Imagine a boy band concert, but instead of screaming teens, it's stern-faced law enforcement officers. Why, you might ask, would so many deputies feel the need to attend the arraignment of one man? Was there a 2-for-1 donut deal at the courthouse cafe? Were they all suddenly overcome with a passionate interest in due process? Or, and call me cynical, could it possibly have been a subtle or perhaps not so subtle show of force? A little bit of we're watching you, and also we have a lot of friends, and they all have guns and badges. It's the kind of power play that doesn't need to speak its intentions aloud. This wasn't just about observing justice. It felt more like an attempt to the atmosphere of justice, to ensure everyone in that room, the judge, the lawyers, perhaps even the defendant himself, was keenly aware of the collective umbrage of the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. It's like inviting your entire rugby team to your child's parent-teacher conference just to discuss a C in art. A tad excessive, perhaps? Or is excessive just the standard operating procedure when one of your own has fallen, regardless of the tragic circumstances that might have preceded it? Rodney Hinton Jr., a man with no prior felonies, now stood accused of aggravated murder, facing a sea of uniforms. The message was clear. You mess with one of ours, you mess with all of ours. Which is a fine sentiment for a gang, but a slightly more troubling one for a taxpayer-funded institution sworn to protect and serve, even those whose children have been recently killed by other members of a similar institution. The irony was so thick, you could spread it on toast. If you weren't too busy being intimidated, that is. Section 5. Stares and Scares Intimidation Theater Matinee Showing. Let's delve deeper into this courtroom spectacle, shall we? Because a large number of deputies doesn't quite capture the sheer theatricality of it all. Imagine Rodney Hinton Jr., a man undoubtedly still reeling from a tsunami of grief, guilt, and God knows what else walking into that courtroom. He's probably expecting the usual legal rigmarole. What he gets instead is a silent, staring phalanx of law enforcement. Every single white cop, or so it probably felt to him. And let's be honest, the optics probably weren't far off glaring daggers. It's like being the only person at a Star Wars convention dressed as a Star Trek character. Uncomfortable, to say the least. This wasn't just a show of solidarity for their fallen colleague. Oh no, this was intimidation theater, and it was a sold-out matinee performance, the kind of silent treatment that screams louder than any shouted threat. Each pair of eyes was a tiny little laser beam attempting to burn a hole through Rodney's composure. One can only imagine the internal monologue. Don't look! Don't look! Definitely don't make eye contact. Are they all breathing in unison? This is deeply unsettling. It's a psychological play designed to make the accused feel small, isolated, and utterly overwhelmed. The sheer visual of it is absurd. Dozens of grown men, armed and in uniform, congregating to glower at one bereaved, broken individual. What exactly was the strategic objective here? Were they worried he might suddenly develop superpowers and attempt a daring escape? Or was it simply a primal display? A sort of law enforcement haka, meant to convey their collective anger and perhaps to subtly remind the judicial system who holds the real power in this town. It's a bit like bringing a tank to a knife fight that you arguably started. And the beautiful tragic irony? This overwhelming show of force, this silent collective condemnation, was directed at a man whose actions, however horrific and indefensible, were born out of a desperate, shattered reaction to the loss of his son at the hands of, wait for it, law enforcement. It's a feedback loop of tragedy and aggression, a snake eating its own tail, all playing out under the supposedly impartial gaze of Lady Justice, who, one assumes, must have been peeking through her blindfold and thinking, oh, for crying out loud, not this again. Section 6. The official script outrage, but only for some. When a police officer or deputy is killed, the official response is swift, predictable, and loud. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, for instance, was sickened by the killing of the deputy, condemning it as an apparent intentional act of violence. Which, to be fair, it very likely was. But the speed and volume of this official outrage often stand in stark contrast to the response when a civilian is killed by police. Then the language is often more muted, more cautious. Tragic incident, under investigation. Let's wait for all the facts. It's a tale of two official scripts. Hamilton County Prosecutor Connie Pillich chimed in, vowing to pursue the full force of the law if the act was proven intentional. Again, understandable. That's her job. But one can't help but wonder where this full force of the law was when Ryan Hinton was shot. Was there an equivalent, immediate, and public vow to uncover every single detail of death with the same ferocious intensity? Or does the full force of the law have a preferred direction, like a weather vane stuck pointing towards civilians? Sheriff Charmaine McGuffey described the deceased deputy as wonderful and dedicated, well-liked and known, and I have no doubt he was. He was a human being, a public servant, and his death is a tragedy. Cincinnati Police Chief Teresa Thietke also expressed sorrow. These are human reactions and necessary ones. But the sheer volume of coordinated official grief for one side of this equation, while the grief for Ryan Hinton was largely a private family affair, punctuated by official statements about an armed suspect, is telling. It paints a picture. The narrative quickly solidifies. Hero cop struck down by a villain. It's simple, it's clean, it's good for the press releases. But life, especially when it involves multiple deaths and systemic issues, is rarely that simple. The apparent intentional act of violence by Rodney Hinton Jr. didn't occur in a vacuum. It occurred in the immediate, superheated aftermath of another violent death, one that the official script seemed far less eager to explore with the same level of public indignation and sorrow. It's selective sorrow, and it's a bad look. Section 7. Video killed the Clarity Star, the mystery of the blurry body cam. Ah, the body camera footage. The supposed panacea for all police-civilian interaction disputes. The great equalizer. The unblinking eye of truth. Except, of course, when it's blurry. In the case of Ryan Hinton's shooting, the body cam footage, which the police themselves said showed Ryan pointing a gun, had a slight problem. According to the police chief, the video was blurred due to movement. Blurred. Due to movement. Right. Because high-stakes, life-or-death situations are famously static and well-lit, perfect for capturing crisp, clear HD footage. So officers shouted, "He's got a gun," which is certainly alarming. But the crucial visual evidence, the part that would definitively show Ryan Hinton pointing that alleged gun with the extended magazine, conveniently obscured by the dreaded blur. It's the technological equivalent of the dog ate my homework. It's not that it happens, but it happens with a suspicious frequency when clear footage might complicate the official narrative. One starts to wonder if these body cams are sourced from the same manufacturer as Bigfoot sighting cameras. The family, including Rodney Hinton Jr., viewed this masterpiece of obfuscation just hours before he allegedly went on his tragic rampage. Imagine their frustration. You're promised answers, you're promised evidence, and you get a smudge. A Rorschach test where the police tell you what you're supposed to be seeing. Yes, it's blurry, but trust us, there's definitely a gun in there, pointed menacingly. Just squint a bit. No, not like that. It's enough to make anyone question the very concept of objective reality, let alone the official story. And here's the kicker. There was no evidence Ryan Hinton actually fired at the police, so we have a potentially blurry gun pointing, no shots fired by the suspect, and yet he ends up dead. The investigation into Ryan's death is, of course, ongoing, just like the investigation into the quality control of police body cameras should be. Because if the technology designed to provide clarity consistently fails to do so at the most critical moments, then it's not serving its purpose. It's just serving to create more questions, more anger, and, tragically, sometimes more victims. Section 8. No prior felonies, just maximum despair. Let's talk about Rodney Hinton Jr. for a moment. Not the alleged cop killer, but the man before May 2nd, 2025. According to reports, he had no prior felonies. This isn't a career criminal. This isn't someone with a long history of violent outbursts or a deep-seated hatred for law enforcement. This is, by all appearances, a regular guy. A father, someone who, up until that point, had navigated life without a major criminal record. And then his son was killed. And then he saw the blurry video. And then something broke. This detail is crucial because it paints a picture not of a hardened monster, but of a man driven to an unthinkable act by unimaginable grief and rage. The kind of despair that short-circuits all rational thought. The kind that makes you feel like the entire world has not only tilted off its axis, but is now actively trying to crush you. When the system you're supposed to trust for justice and answers instead offers you a dead son and a blurry video, where do you turn? For Rodney Hinton Jr. The answer was apparently his car, and a target that represented the source of his pain. The Hamilton County prosecutor might argue for deliberate attempt, and legally, they might be right. But the deliberation of a mind steeped in fresh, raw, agonizing trauma is a very different beast from cold, calculated malice. It's the deliberation of a drowning man flailing for anything to hold on to, even if that thing pulls him under faster. His actions were horrific, resulting in the death of another human being, the deputy. There's no excusing that. But understanding the psychological crucible he was in is vital if we're to make sense of any of this. To go from no prior felonies to accused of aggravated murder of a police officer in the span of roughly 24 hours is not a gentle character arc. It's a plummet. It speaks to a level of emotional devastation that most of us, thankfully, will never experience. It suggests that the initial tragedy, the death of Ryan Hinton, and the way it was handled, created a pressure cooker of despair. And on May 2nd, that pressure cooker exploded, with devastating consequences for everyone in its blast radius. Section 9. An eye for an eye makes the whole world need dash cams. So, what are we left with? A dead teenager, Ryan Hinton, shot by police under circumstances obscured by a blurry body cam. A dead deputy, struck down while directing traffic for a graduation ceremony, a symbol of futures his killer's son would never see. And a father, Rodney Hinton Jr., facing an aggravated murder charge, his life irrevocably shattered by a chain of events that began with the loss of his child. It's a tragedy wrapped in an absurdity, sprinkled with a heavy dose of systemic failure. It's not funny, it's bleakly, horribly ironic. The police response to Rodney's court appearance, that intimidating sea of uniforms versus the opaque response to Ryan's death, highlights a chasm in empathy, a chasm in accountability, a chasm in how justice is perceived and pursued. When the system meant to protect and serve seems to protect its own above all else, and serve answers that are more frustrating than fulfilling, it breeds a dangerous kind of desperation. It's a desperation that can lead a man with no prior felonies to commit an act of terrible, misguided vengeance. The calls for the full force of the law for Rodney Hinton Jr. are loud and clear, and the law will, undoubtedly, run its course. But will there be an equally forceful examination of the events that led to Ryan Hinton's death? Will there be a reckoning with the blurry footage and the questions it leaves unanswered? Or will we just add another layer to the cynicism? Another reason for communities to distrust the very people sworn to protect them. This whole sorry saga feels less like a pursuit of justice, and more like a grim, predictable cycle. Ultimately, this isn't just about Rodney Hinton or the deputy he killed, or even Ryan Hinton. It's about a system that seems to be failing everyone. A system where accountability can feel selective, where grief can curdle into violence, and where the aftermath of one tragedy can so easily, so quickly sow the seeds for another. An eye for an eye, as they say, makes the whole world blind. And in this case, it also makes the whole world desperately in need of clearer body cams, and perhaps a more reliable moral compass for all involved.